Now this is what I call a rogue build. It zippity zaps through all content with ease, flies through high corruption monoliths, deletes bosses and rips Julra a new one. And what's better, this is not only true for endgame, but it's just as smooth when leveling all the way to 1000 corruption, making it the perfect build to use when progressing. Oh, and did I mention that it's fun as fuck too? Yeah, because it truly is. Finally, we have a strong build where it actually feels like you're playing a rogue, and you're not just an appendix to a fucking bird. Alright, and what is this build then? It's the Dancing Strike's Shadow Cascade Bladestorm auto-casting Shuriken Shadow Stacking Bladedancer, or DSSCBACSSSBD for short. And in this one, we'll cover everything you need to take the build from level 1 all the way into 1000 corruption. So without further ado, let's get started with the main interactions making the build work. For starters, we have our Dancing Strike skill. This was massively buffed in Season 4, where the most important change was making it not clunky as shit to play. Its movement is now silky smooth, it has increased radius, and you can actually stay still when using it and fighting bosses. Its damage is also great, while at the same time boosting our other skills, but we're also going to use it for casting Shadow Cascade, for additional damage, AoE and mana generation. Next, we have Bladestorm. This skill was completely changed this season, and we use it for a few different reasons. First being, it deals truckloads of damage. Secondly, it synergizes nicely with Shadow Cascade for another truckload of damage. And finally, it spawns shurikens for us, which is yet another layer of damage. This means that we don't actually have to cast shurikens, rather we have our Bladestorm do it for us. This makes the build silky smooth to play, because all we do is spawn a Bladestorm every few seconds, which mind you has aimbot and seeks out enemies by itself now, and then we just press the Dancing Strike button for movement and damage. All the other skills, excluding Smoke Bomb, are automatically casted. And speaking of Smoke Bomb, why are we using that? Well, for a lot of reasons. It spawns shadows, which our Shadow Cascade uses. It grants us damage, dodge, damage reduction, and it's also our main traversal skill. Alright, and for the final skill, we have Puncture. Why do we have that on our bars? Well, it's only used when leveling. Once you're level 40 or so, you can throw it in the trash and never look back. And speaking of leveling, let's check out how you use it there. Starting us right off the bat, it doesn't fucking matter what skills you use at the start. Just put something onto your bars and stick with it for a few levels. The part that actually matters is when you unlock Puncture and Bladestorm. The former, we're going to specialize into Bleed and use this as our mana generator for most of the leveling. And for Bladestorm, we're using it for maximum damage. So the rotation becomes throw out Bladestorms, run out of mana, spam Puncture, and repeat. You're not going to use any skill other than these two when leveling up early for damage. The only other skills you'll use are Dash for mobility and Smoke Bomb for defense. Then once you've unlocked your mastery, go with the Falconer when leveling, as it's going to make leveling a whole lot smoother. And the reason I'm making these choices are due to a few different reasons. Firstly, Puncture is used when leveling because if you go full-out Bladedancer early, then you're just going to run out of mana, which sucks mad balls. Secondly, we want to use range skills when leveling because we want to do a massive campaign skip and hop into monoliths at level 30. In the previous season, they increased the early monolith difficulty by quite a bit, so playing ranged is mandatory early on, or you'll just keep dying. And finally, Falconer is used early on because it speeds up the leveling process early on, having an easy screen wiping ability. Alright, and once you've leveled up in the monoliths, you can make the swap to Bladedancer around level 40 or 50 and never look back. Because this is where you specialize into the endgame build. All you need is some throwing damage and mana cost reduction rings and you'll be up and running. I'll have a planner in the description for the leveling skill choices, but let's take a deeper look into the endgame version so you know what's going on there. And we'll start off with the skill tree. For our dancing strikes, this will indeed deal substantial amounts of damage, but it's more so used for all the interactions with our other skills. Firstly, it's a melee skill, so we're a bit restricted in how we can scale it, but we can use it to spawn shadow daggers when cast for a large chunk of damage. Then, we have it shred enemy physical resistance and summons Shadow Cascade. And Shadow Cascade, my friends, deals a truckload of damage, because here we can scale both melee and throwing damage, and we can also have 5 shadows use the skill at once for even more damage. But going back to dancing strikes, we're also going to have it throw out even more shurikens. We're going to boost our overall damage via rhythm, and we're going to get both 20% damage and damage reduction via Graceful Arena. Yummers. Next we have Blade Storm, and here we're going for Razor Aim, so we only have to cast 1 Blade Storm at a time. After that, we want Magnetic Grip for Aimbot, Alloy Animation, so that it seeks out enemies faster, and the same goes for Hurricane. With these, you now only have to cast 1 of them, let them seek out all enemies, and enjoy your free kills. Alright, and next we go for Shuriken Storm, as this is going to be our main way of spawning shurikens when paired with Surge of Steel. For this to work, however, we are going to need some mana regeneration, as we need to stay at 50% mana or more. Then we have some damage and another main interaction, Shadow Storm. This allows our Shadow Cascade to boost the Blade Storm hits, and since we're spawning a lot of Shadow Cascades via our shadows, this means a lot more Blade Storm damage. And finally, some extra damage and our lovely Nightblade for more Shadow Dagger damage. Alright, and on to Smoke Bomb. Here we are going for the typical nodes. We use it to generate Dusk Shrouds for extra defense. We use it for Silver Shrouds, allowing us to dodge and gain ward. We have it for traversing the map, and we also use it for a large chunk of extra damage and spawning our shadows. Next, we have Shadow Cascade. This is simply used for a truckload of damage, so that's what we're grabbing. Damage, damage, more damage, and of course damage. But we're also using it for a large chunk of mana generation via Onslaught and Fight in the Shadows. This works especially great when mapping, as Gloomstalker ensures we have shadows up at all times, and Fight in the Shadows then generates mana for us. And for our final skill, we have Shurikens. Here we don't have a lot of interesting interactions, rather, it's just one of our main ways of dealing damage. So we grab a lot of additional damage, shuriken throws, shred, and physical penetration. Great job, friends. Skills complete. Let's have a look at the gear now so you know what you're looking for. I'm currently rocking a full life version, but it's absolutely possible to play a low life variant as well. Doing that does, however, require the Architects of Astral Blood Legendary and a ward gain Slam on your gloves, which is expensive as shit. So in case you're starting out, I recommend the full life variant, as you can just grab items as you go, nothing being mandatory, and you can just do your best to grab similar items. Alright, and starting us off with the non-legendaries. Here you're looking for truckloads of max life as to not fucking die, followed by capping your resistances. There's one thing you need to solve first though, and that is grabbing throwing damage on your rings. Not because you need the damage, but because you need the mana cost reduction, or else the build doesn't work. That's pretty much the only mandatory part of the build before you can play it. And when it comes to the legendaries, we first have Omnis. I'm using this for the extra skill rank and resistances, but if you're playing COF, then this may be difficult to obtain and you can just grab a regular amulet with lots of resistances, and preferably a skill rank corrupt. For your chest, you can grab Woven's Flash and slam on extra life, which instantly solves crit avoidance. But any high life chest will work just fine. As weapons, the Velasin's Jaw is absolutely insane. This is a primordial dagger, and since you can only use one primordial item at a time, you can't combine this with the Architect's Chest, meaning you can only use this for the full life variant. It's definitely worth it though, seeing as the stats are excellent and you gain 4 ranks to all of your skills. It also eliminates a lot of physical resistances. For the offhand, however, Traitor's Tongue is the best as it grants you a large chunk of base crit chance when equipped in your offhand. Then you can slam any decent physical damage mods on it. For your gloves, grab Liraka for the large chunk of extra throwing damage and slam extra throwing damage. We then have the sneakers, where Razor Fall is used solely for its stats, that is, its movement speed and the fact it grants us 2 additional throwing skill ranks. And finally, Artifice of Devastation for yet another 2 skill ranks, a lot of throwing damage, while also helping us solve our mana via extra mana and mana regeneration. The final line is not that relevant, but it's a small amount of extra damage as well. Alright, and then we get to the idols. This season, there are just way too many ways of setting up your idols. Fuck man, my head just hurts from scrolling through all the options. But what I did was grabbing increased health from huge idols and threw in 3 huge idols to boost my life. Beyond the 2 other slots, I used large idols for extra life as well, meaning basically all I cared about was grabbing a lot of life to stay alive. But you can look for damage ones as well, of course. Hell, experiment a little, like my wife used to say before ripping my butthole wide open. And then finally, the blessings. There are 3 universal ones I typically go for, which are the crit multiplier, all resistance, and endurance. The others you can grab whatever you need. Alright, done with the gear. Don't forget to grab some slick cosmetics while you're at it. Since I'm a partner, you can use my link in the description to grab some at a solid price. I'm broke as shit, so I can't afford any, but you may be able to. Okay, done with the sellout. Let's check out the passives, and then I'll show you how to play the build. In the Rogue passive tree, we just grab all of the damage reduction and defensive nodes here, followed by this very important node, Twin Blade, as this is what allows us to dual wield. And finally, the critical precision node to cap out our crit chance. With the Bladedancer reworks, there are just tons of fantastic nodes to grab here. We start with grabbing Cloak of Shadows for glancing blows and being able to path towards Veil of Night, allowing us to quickly stack up Dusk Shrouds. Attack speed is also important, not only because more hits equals more damage equals bigger dick, but also because our Shadow Cascade scales directly via attack speed as well. Going back to the passives, we have some more damage and defense, followed by grabbing Flow. This both increases our damage and it allows us to stack attack speed as well. Next, we head on over to grab some Leech, damage, and these magnificent nodes, Perfection and Confidence. We're easily stacking this to 10, meaning 100% increased damage here, 60 here, along with 600 armor and dodge. Yummers. Next, we grab some extra crit chance, along with all in for extra crit multi. Since we're going for 100% crit chance, this one has upsides only. We also have our way of generating permanent frailty here for damage reduction, along with some final shadow damage, Dusk Shrouds, and 1 additional shadow. Lovely. And with that, we're done with this shit. Let's quickly check out how you can play the build in the endgame. For running monoliths, it's easy peasy. You have your smoke bomb for traversing, you throw out your blade storms whenever they run out, or you have to move them, and you use dancing strikes for damage. Simple as that. When doing events and shit, you want to use smoke bomb as often as possible for sure, and preferably also stand within it for damage reduction and damage bonuses. This is especially important during bosses, because here, your only source of shadow generation comes from smoke bomb. So make sure you always keep your smoke bomb up here. Before the boss spawn, you can drop it down to ensure you start the fight with 5 shadows. Then, you just drop down a blade storm and spam your dancing strikes. If you don't want to move with every hit of dancing strikes, you just place your cursor on top of yourself and you'll stand still. All right, folks, that's all for this one. Drop a sub, and I'll see you in the next one.